Well, hey, everybody, happy Easter, and we are so excited that you're here with us as we're wrapping up a special 2 week series entitled Love. And as we've been going through this series, we've been talking about this concept, and I want to tell you about a particular story where I didn't personally feel like I was loved or accepted. And this particular instance happened when I went into seventh grade. Because for our school, we had kindergarten through sixth grade in one building, and then seventh and eighth grade, our junior high, was actually in the same building as our high school. And when I transitioned into seventh grade, I remember walking around, and even though it was a lot of the classmates that I had been with pretty much my whole life, I didn't really feel like I fit in. I was an angsty and an awkward middle schooler. I wasn't in a good place emotionally, and it took me several attempts to find a group of friends that I could actually fit in with. But before I made friends, I remember walking the halls of the school, and for several months it felt really uncomfortable everywhere I went. I would walk the halls, and I really felt like everybody was kind of looking at me with this weird expression on their face. And you've heard me talk about this before if you've been to any of our discussions before, where, I wasn't the star athlete. I didn't really have any friends to prove that I could be a really good friend. And I didn't play a musical instrument or sing really well. And I didn't really have that standout thing. And so it was like I was just there. And I felt like everybody was watching me. And they were deciding, are we going to give him a chance? I kind of felt like a fish in a fishbowl, where everybody was just looking at me from the outside, but nobody was really in there with me. And maybe for you, you've had a similar experience to this. Maybe you can relate to how I felt. Maybe for you, it wasn't middle school or junior high. Maybe it was when you started high school and you started to see things through a different lens. Because you moved into this new building or into this new school, and yeah, you knew some of the kids that moved up with you from your middle school, but at the same time, there were a lot of people around you that you didn't know. And it felt uncomfortable. Or maybe there was a time, it was the first time you walked in the doors of a church, or the first time you came to youth group and you got connected with a small group. Because here's the thing, when we walk into a new space, it's easy to feel like we're the new kid. And there's this weird feeling of, am I going to be unnoticed? And as we think about this, hopefully after a short period of time, you start to feel a little more comfortable, a little more able to interact with people around you. But let's be honest, it's easy for us sometimes just to not engage. And we probably have wrestled with the question, well, if I don't show up, would anybody even notice? I think we've all wondered that question, or maybe these questions here. Does it even matter if I'm here? Does anyone care what I think? Or does anyone notice what I have to say? You see, chances are we've probably wrestled with those questions. Because for some of us, maybe we say, okay, yeah, I've wrestled with that, but I'm the center of the universe. And maybe you felt that way, or you feel like at least you should be the center of the universe. Like you feel like the world should revolve around you, that you say, well, I need a ride to practice or to whatever it is. And so everybody should just stop what they're doing and take care of that to make it happen. Or if you're hanging out with a group of friends and they throw out a movie to watch and you're like, yeah, I don't really think that that's the movie that we should watch because it's not the movie you want to watch. You feel like maybe that could be an option, but it shouldn't definitely be the only option. You see, there are times that we feel like we're the center of the world, or we think we should be. But let's be honest, there are also times that we feel like nobody really notices us at all. And maybe it happened to you when you were at a friend's party that you had to be at, that the friend said you have to come to this party. But then you got there and the friend never really talked to you or interacted with you at all. And as you're at the party, you say, well, it's the party that I had to be at, but I wonder if anybody would really notice if I just slipped out the back door. Or maybe you feel unnoticed when your parents consistently talk about your sister's SAT scores or how your brother is the star athlete, and you don't hear them telling anybody about how great you are. And you say, well, maybe it's not my friends or family. It could be your crush or your coach or your teacher or a combination of all of these. But here's the thing. When we don't feel seen or valued by people in our lives, it starts to make us feel like we don't matter. It starts to make us feel like we don't matter. And as you think about this, whenever we feel overlooked or ignored, it's easy to become discouraged. It's easy to feel numb or disengaged. And we say, well, if nobody's listening, why should I bother speaking? If nobody's paying attention, then it really doesn't matter what I do. You see, when we feel like we don't matter, it takes the passion and excitement out of our lives. When we don't feel like we're thriving in life, we feel like we're just surviving. And here's the thing, nobody wants to feel that way. But it's more than that. You see, it's possible that we have a lot of people in our lives who are telling us that we matter. Maybe it's your parents or your caregivers, grandparents, coaches. But when they tell us those things, we don't believe them. We say, well, you're a parent or a caregiver, and so you're supposed to say that. Or you're a coach and you just want to try to get the best performance from us. And so whether we hear this message a lot or whether we hear this message at all, believing that we matter is a lot harder than it looks. But the good news for us today is that we're going to talk about somebody who is very familiar with those same feelings that we've all experienced. And what we can learn from her life is a game changer for all of us. Because in this series, as we talk about love, we're talking about the stories that surround Easter. The day that we celebrate Jesus' resurrection. The day that Jesus showed that out of his love for us, that he was stronger than death. And that he is bigger and more loving than we could ever possibly imagine. And as we've been talking through this, we've talked about people who have encountered Jesus firsthand and how his love specifically impacted them. And today as we do this, we're going to talk about a woman named Mary. And we're going to talk about her experience with Jesus before and after the resurrection. Now, as we've said before, the first 4 books of the New Testament are accounts of Jesus' life, ministry, death, and resurrection. But they're all written by different people. And we call them the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in these stories about Jesus' life, there's a woman whose name is Mary Magdalene. And she shows up pretty often. But to be honest, we really don't know a whole lot about Mary Magdalene. Like, for example, we know for sure that she was a committed follower of Jesus. And we know that her name is mentioned more than any other woman who wasn't in Jesus' family. Luke actually tells us that she traveled with Jesus and she helped support his ministry financially. But what we also know is that historically, about 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was on the earth, and in the area that they particularly lived, women were often overlooked and ignored. And I think we can safely assume that Mary understood what it meant to feel like she didn't really matter. Now, the Gospel of John, which is one of the first 4 books of the New Testament, it records that while it was still dark, Mary got up and she went to the tomb. Now, this is the tomb that Jesus was placed in after he had been crucified. And when she got there, this huge stone that was in front of the tomb had been moved away. It had been moved away. And Mary didn't immediately think, of course he's gone, Jesus is alive. No, she assumed that somebody had messed with the grave and somebody had taken his body. And so she runs back to town and she tells Peter and another disciple, and they run to the tomb as well. And sure enough, they discover that Mary was right. The stone was gone. The body of Jesus, the man that they proclaimed to be their Lord and Savior, was gone. And all that was left were the grave clothes that Jesus was buried in. And if the sadness of losing a friend wasn't enough, now there's the added trauma that his body had been taken or removed. And so John writes these particular words. He says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look in the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't realize it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?' thinking he was the gardener. She said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. So on the day that Jesus defeats death, he made sure that Mary was there to see it. He wanted to prove to her that God's love is bigger and stronger than anything else. And this was a big deal because in the first century, when Jesus was alive, a woman wasn't given equal rights. They were treated as property or second-class citizens. And women weren't considered reliable. And so why would they trust her word over a man's? They wouldn't oftentimes. And yet over and over again in the Gospels, at the cross, at the tomb, on Easter morning, it was a woman who saw Jesus first, who recognized him, and who was given the job of telling other people about him. You could say it this way, that Jesus prioritized making sure Mary knew she mattered by trusting her with the greatest news of all, that he had risen. You see, when the rest of the world saw women as less than, Jesus valued them and elevated them. Jesus valued them and elevated them. Now, I don't know about you, but chances are as you've gone through your life, if you're anything like me, you've kind of collected labels. Labels that maybe make you feel like you don't matter. And some of those labels are given to you by yourself, and some of those labels are given to you by other people. And as these labels come along, oftentimes it creates some issues for us. And if we're honest with ourselves, we've probably all experienced this, that maybe we tend to collect labels. But the love of Jesus that was displayed on the cross, the power of the resurrection that was demonstrated on Easter morning, it shows us that God calls me, his child, who matters, that I'm important to him. You see, Jesus knew Mary and he called her by name. He chose for her to be the first person that he was actually going to share the good news with of his resurrection, which would demonstrate his love to the world. So even though the world may have told Mary, "You don't matter," Jesus communicated to her over and over again that not only did she matter and not only did she have value, but that he loved her. And the same is true for us. That no matter what messages we may be getting, because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the demonstration of his love that was poured out for us, we can take what Jesus said seriously. You can think of it this way, that love lets people know they matter. Love lets people know they matter. You see, just like Mary mattered to Jesus, so do you. He said her name. Just like he said the names of so many people who felt overlooked or unseen or forgotten, he wanted them to know that they mattered too. His love shows you that not only did they matter, but that you matter as well. And so this Easter, that's the message that I want you to take with you, is to know that you are seen, known, loved, and important. You see, Jesus says so. And we can take his words seriously when he says that he loves us. Because Easter Sunday is a reminder that we can and that we should. Because it's a reminder that we matter. That the person next to you matters. And when we live like that's true, our lives look different. And so today I want to give two specific invitations to you. The first is this, is I want you to think about how you treat yourself and others. I want you to think about how you treat yourself and others. And to do that, I want you to ask yourself some very kind of challenging questions. So questions like, do you believe that you matter? Do you treat yourself like you matter? Do you allow other people to treat you as if you don't matter? Do you treat others as if they matter? Are there people that you treat like they matter more? Are there people that you treat like they don't matter at all? What would it look like for you to start loving yourself and loving others as Jesus did? Loving them like they matter, starting today. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is this, is after you ask yourself those questions, I want to invite you to take a step. To just take a step. Take a step of faith. Maybe for you, you say, I'm noticing a pattern in my life that's not good, that's not God-honoring, that's not loving. I would encourage you to talk to somebody and ask them to pray with you. Ask them to pray that your heart would be healed in this area. Or maybe today you say, it's time for me to get real and honest with my small group or with a trusted adult about how I feel and about what I'm trying to work through. Maybe you've never put your trust in Jesus and you've never really thought about that he did what he did out of love for you. And so I want to invite you today that if that's you, to put your trust in him. Maybe it's for the first time today. You see, what would change in your life if you really believe that you matter to God? And because of that, that not only you matter to God, but the people around you matter to God. This week, I want you to take some time and talk to somebody about this. To think about what would actually change in your life if you believe that God loves you and that you matter to him. You see, God loves you so much that he sent Jesus to die for you. And if you put your faith in him, you can spend forever, eternity with him. And that's what love looks like. Because love lets people know they matter. And because Jesus died for you, you can know that you matter as well. Well, thank you so much for checking out this final installment of our series, Love. We hope that this has been encouraging and beneficial to you. We want you to know that we want you to ask yourself, how am I treating other people? How am I letting other people treat me? And not only that, as you look at that, take a step this week. Start with this. Maybe it's a small step. Maybe it's a significant step. Maybe it's one of the things we mentioned or something else entirely. But take a small step towards God this week. Maybe you find ways to love and serve him. Maybe you find ways to spend more time in his word or to pray more or to talk to somebody about some struggle or issue that you're having. We want you to know that when we gather together in person, and we'd love to have you join us on Sunday nights from 6 to 8 p.m. in the youth room at New Hope Church, that we have small groups that help you to do this, to gather together, to talk, to pray for each other, to encourage each other, to help each other with your struggles as you navigate life. Because we understand it's a very challenging season that you're in. And so we'd love to have you join us in person. Again, we hope and trust that this series has been helpful for you. And we want you to know that we want you to have a great and amazing Easter and a wonderful week. And we hope to see you soon.